We're still dealing with the Code of Conduct in Topic 1, Paper 6. And Section 5.4 looks at the risk disclosure statements that should be considered for a client agreement, standard material. Now, 5.5, conduct requirements in relation to over-the-counter derivative transactions. This is more recent material that's been added to the Code of Conduct, and it's to do with mitigating and managing risk with regard to over-the-counter derivative transactions. There's heightened risk. It's not exchange traded. You have increased credit risk. You've got market risk. And so this code looks at mitigating the risk in these transactions that are not centrally cleared, and there are some requirements there, as well as considering group affiliates and other connected persons. I have a read through the material. I wouldn't say this is core, but it is a recent addition to the Code of Conduct. Okay, we're leaving the Code of Conduct and now moving on to management, supervision, and the internal control guidelines that have been issued by the SFC, which cover 8 key areas of business control. And the 8 are there at the top of page 45. This material well covered at paper 1, and obviously paper 6 has exposure to it. This material is not difficult. It's very standard. It's operational requirements for intermediaries. So I'll leave you in your own time just to flick through and remind yourself of what is contained under management and supervision, segregation of duties and functions, personnel and training, information management, compliance, audit, and that is internal audit, operational controls, and these are suggested operational controls, and you certainly shouldn't go memorizing these. These are controls to enable an intermediary to comply with the rules, regulations, codes, and guidelines. And the 8th key area is risk management. Okay, Section 7. Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, again, very standard material, and if it comes up, it would be one question. So familiarize yourself with the 6 principles, the data protection principles. We are familiar with these just from the small print when we fill in our own personal data. Section 8 covers the prevention of money laundering and terrorist financing. Again, very standard material that we've seen in previous papers. There's the 6 pieces of legislation and one SFC guideline outlined at the top of page 53. And those ordinances are then detailed from section 8.1 through to 8.4 and the guidelines on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing, 8.5. And the guidelines are detailed in the following pages, page 55, 56, 57. Okay, section 9 covers discipline. And as we know, the SFC can suspend or revoke a license if a person ceases to be fit and proper. They can also publicly or privately reprimand you and impose a fine. Also, those persons that can be disciplined include managers in charge, not just those that are licensed. Now, the SFC has issued disciplinary fining guidelines, and they tell us the more serious the misconduct, the larger the fine will be. And more serious cases will be where misconduct was intentional or reckless, damages the integrity of the market, causes losses or cost to others, provides a benefit to the intermediaries or others. But when handing down the sanction, the SFC will also consider a number of factors, and they're listed there. A breach of fiduciary duty was involved. Well, that's worse. There was serious or systemic weakness in the management and internal control systems. That will not be looked upon kindly. Intermediary reported the misconduct and cooperated with the SFC. That will be seen positively. Intermediary has taken remedial steps. Again, that would be viewed positively. The intermediary staff have previous disciplinary records. That's not so good. Any other punishment will be taken by the authorities. That again would be seen negatively, and if there's any civil actions, that's not so good. Well, classic Hong Kong. If you do cooperate, if the SFC looks kindly upon you, you will get a discount on your sanction up to 30% if you cooperate with the proceedings. And they list ways of cooperating with the SFC. Moving on to section 10, corporate governance and regulatory supervision by the SFC. Again, this is very standard material in the licensing exams. With regard to corporate governance, the third main bullet point there, an objective of good corporate governance is to avoid management taking improper advantage of its position to the detriment of the company's interests, but also the detriment of other stakeholders. So that would be the likes of directors, shareholders, suppliers, customers, etc. Now, what is good corporate governance? There we are, the fourth main bullet point. Corporate governance can be improved through installing appropriate checks and balances, such as separating the functions of chairman and CEO. That is seen as good corporate governance. Appointment of non-executive directors is considered to be good corporate governance. Establishment of independent audit committees and the setting up of remuneration and benefit committees. And there are a number of other points listed there which are associated with good corporate governance. Regulatory supervision by the SFC, well, we really know this. They're just wrapping it all up into one area. SFC supervise industry by licensing, well, that's what we're studying. Supervision and monitoring, marketing of investment products, that is through the authorization of collective investment schemes, and discipline. And as I've said previously, the SFC conducts regular inspections of licensed corporations and will, if required, share information with overseas regulators. Let's move on to the last section of topic 1, paper 6, and that's the regulation and supervision by the Mandatory Provident Fund Authority and the Insurance Authority. Now, this is regulation supervision by these two regulators with regard to mandatory provident fund schemes. Is this something that's going to be heavily examined? In some exams, there are no questions on mandatory provident fund schemes, but in others, there is an element of exposure. There's a lot of material on it. I wouldn't go learning this 100%, or rather spending all my time so that I get all the questions 100% correct. But I certainly would prepare myself so that I have a good chance of getting anything 50 to 70% correct. Now, trustees. Under the Mandatory Provident Fund Authority, all MPF schemes must be operated by a trustee, operated by the MPFA, looking after all the investments. And the categories: corporate trustee incorporated in Hong Kong, corporate trustee incorporated outside Hong Kong, and individual trustees. This material, I would suggest, is way off on the edge, peripheral. We then have details of penalties and sanctions imposed by the authority on trustees. Now, custodians with regard to managed provident fund schemes, MPF scheme trustee must appoint a custodian, actually looking after the investments. Trustee is looking after the scheme contributors. If eligible, a scheme trustee may also act as the custodian. Only authorised financial institutions and registered trust companies are eligible to act as custodians as long as they have sufficient presence control in Hong Kong. Now, please remember, this is very specific to managed provident fund schemes. Okay, let's get an idea of who the Mpf intermediaries are. They are persons who sell, market, or give advice on MPF schemes, and they must register with the MPFA. Two categories of MPF intermediary. And remember, this is not the same as licensed corporations, registered institutions. That's the world of SFC regulated activity. Here we're focusing on MPF. You have the principal intermediary. Primary requirement is to be registered as a principal intermediary. must either be licensed with the insurance authority or Type 1, Type 4 licensed with the SFC, must apply for approval of either a subsidiary intermediary or an individual who will carry out the regulated activities, must apply for approval of an individual to act as a responsible officer. Now, you will find that the big insurance companies are principal intermediaries. That would be an example. And then we have subsidiary intermediary, companies or individuals attached to principal intermediary, agents, for example, for the purpose of carrying out the regulated activities, and they will need to be registered as subsidiary intermediary. Must have been registered within the last 3 years or passed a qualifying exam. Now, do we need to know all this detail? I would be aware of it without getting too concerned. As I say, principal intermediary would be like an insurance company. Subsidiary intermediary would be a smaller company employing a series of agents or an individual agent that goes out and sells and advises on MPF schemes. Now, we've seen this diagram at the bottom of page 61 earlier. The MPFA is the lead regulator with regard to MPF schemes, and then the frontline regulators regulate the individuals, the entities that are actually selling and advising, and you will be regulated under HKMA, the SFC, or Insurance Authority. Now, just as with the SFC, the MPFA has Code of Conduct, and a lot of the Code of Conduct headings are similar to the main Code of Conduct under the SFC that we have been looking at. So on page 62, you will see that performance requirements are under honesty and fairness, diligence, competence, information about clients, information for clients, conflict of interest, client assets. To be honest, you rarely see this examined. So I would be aware of it without getting too concerned. I keep repeating this point. Also, records, compliance, and responsible officers. We have a code of conduct for licensed insurance agents. This is reasonably recent, issued by the Insurance Authority and is applicable to licensed individual insurance agents, licensed insurance agencies, licensed technical reps engaged in licensed insurance. Now, this is the type of material you need to be aware of if you're doing insurance exams. And I stress and repeat that this is not insurance exam. And then we also have a code of conduct for licensed insurance brokers. Okay, that last section, 11, I'd be aware of, but as I say, you may well answer questions on topic 1 on a paper 6 exam, and there are no questions at all on it. Topic 1 is a sizable topic. There are only 4 topics at paper 6, and topic 1 will have in excess of 10 questions from it. So it is not a topic you can ignore. And as I've said before, the way to supplement your reading and learning of the material is to practice questions. And I would refer you to the platform we use, Examinator.online, where you will find over 230 paper 6 practice questions that you will be able to access. And it's by doing those questions, getting them wrong, and on that platform, you will find out why you got the questions wrong. And there's also audio explaining why the answer is, and also giving further advice.